Good morning, and welcome to our 11th Annual Racial Attitudes in Pulaski County Forum. Buenos días y bienvenidos a nuestra 11ª conjunta anual de actitudes raciales en el Foro de Pulaski County. My name is Daniel Torres, and I am an engineering student at the University of Arkansas, Little Rock. We are very excited to have you here today. Mi nombre es Daniel Torres, soy un estudiante de ingeniería en la Universidad de Arkansas en Little Rock, y estamos muy emocionados por tenerlos aquí el día de hoy. This year, we will discuss money, class, and opportunity. We are here to have honest dialogue and take the opportunity to learn more about each other and use that information for the benefit of all. Este año vamos a hablar de dinero, clase y oportunidad. Estamos aquí para tener un diálogo honesto y para tener la oportunidad de aprender más de nosotros y utilizar esa información para el beneficio de todos. Again, welcome. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. He is an advocate for racial and ethnic justice. Under his leadership, the Institute of Government has conducted racial attitude surveys since 2003. Ahora, es un placer de presentar a nuestro siguiente orador. Él es un defensor de la justicia racial y étnica. Bajo su liderazgo, el Instituto de Gobierno ha llevado a cabo nuestras encuestas de actitudes raciales desde 2003. It was his visionary leadership that launched the Institute on Race and Ethnicity in 2011, a place that aims to inquire, reveal, and empower community members like you to create a change in Arkansas. Fue su liderazgo visionario que puso en marcha el Instituto sobre Raza y Etnicidad en 2011, un lugar que tiene como objetivo investigar, revelar y potenciar a los miembros en la comunidad como ustedes para crear un cambio en Arkansas. Please welcome Chancellor Joel E. Anderson.
It's really good to see all of you here today. This is the 11th time that we've done this, and it's one of the events at the university that I really look forward to every year. Now, moral darkness will descend over a people without the bright light of truth. And it's so great to be in a place this morning where there are many individuals and many community influentials. Everyone in the room is an influential in some circle, in some group here in our community. Whether they're students or civic leaders, religious leaders, educational leaders, business leaders, they have been and they are committed to shattering the darkness and letting the bright light of truth in on issues of race and ethnicity. And hence the role of the university, an anchor institution, a leader institution in this community. Your university, the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, has committed to being a keeper of the flame on the issue of race. And this annual survey and the conference that we're attending here today manifests that leadership role of the university. And I've already mentioned the Civil Rights Heritage Trail that could be cited in this connection as well. The university can provide good information on a sensitive issue, and the university is doing that today. The university can provide a safe place for discussing sensitive issues. And the university, and more specifically, the UALR Institute on Race and Ethnicity and the UALR Institute on Government are doing that today. Can provide that safe place for discussing the ugliest and most persistent and most deeply rooted problem and barrier to progress that our community and our state face. And the university does this with the conviction that people of goodwill, with good information, can make progress even on the most difficult of issues. Many people believe that there is no longer a problem, or if there is still a problem with regard to particularly race in Arkansas, that time is taking care of it, and we ought to just leave it alone. And I would submit that that is an example of moral darkness. If time is taking care of it, then the cure is much too slow and will leave many minority citizens to continue to suffer disadvantage for centuries to come, and that would just be wrong. And it would also be disadvantageous to the majority community. Let's consider two Arkansas cities. as examples. Little Rock Central High School was desegregated in 1957, and yes, that was a big step forward. But in 2014, 57 years later, the Little Rock Nine have grandchildren, and race remains a difficult issue in Little Rock's public schools, and it remains a complicating factor in the life of our city. Harrison, one of the infamous group of sundown towns, is known for its race riots in 1905, and today, 109 years later, dedicated citizens there are working to overcome a history of racial fear and bigotry in the life of that city. So if time is a cure, then we're obliged to speed the clock. That's one reason UALR established an Institute on Race and Ethnicity. And I'm glad that our director, Dr. Michael Twyman, is attending his first UALR Racial Attitudes Conference here today. And if you've not met Dr. Twyman, I hope you'll do it before you leave. Now, regarding money, class, and opportunity, may I brag a bit? UALR can give evidence that partnering with business leaders can help to address inequality and opportunity. During our last phase of construction projects on campus, we worked with Bob East and Van Tilbury at East Harding Construction, to ensure that minority-owned businesses were seriously included in the bidding process. Now, the construction industry is a prime example of an industry where it's hard to break into the system and be considered for bids for major projects. But because someone within the system, East Harding, made a conscious effort to reach out and help those who needed access, 16 minority and women-owned businesses received contracts on those two multi-million-dollar major projects. They were not given special consideration or a pass, but simply an opportunity to come and play on the same field. And I want to strongly commend Bob East and Van Tilbury, along with David Millay and Bob Adams at UALR, for their commitment to this endeavor. And I am pleased that with the focus on money, class, and opportunity, this year's survey addresses some aspects of the economics of race and ethnicity. Family income is one important piece of that. Think about it a moment. A high family income does not prevent divorce and the breakup of homes, or the neglect of children, or domestic violence. But with poverty-level income, the odds do go up that family members will suffer such adverse events, and the children will not have the advantages of family stability, good health, and a good education. And I think particularly of the children, because they pass on their problems to the next generation. And we have in this country created a vast economic and social underclass whose members suffer poverty and too frequent incarceration. That underclass includes disproportionate numbers of minorities, African Americans, and an increasing number of Latinos. And we will not here today unravel all of the ins and outs of this phenomenon of the vast underclass. But the survey, along with Dr. Paco's presentation and the panel discussion, will shed light on some pieces of the puzzle and on how some important economic factors fall out across Latinos, African Americans, and whites. I have a hunch we will be disappointed, even unhappy, about some of the things our survey tells us. We would prefer a different picture, maybe in some respects a happier picture. If so, if we're disappointed or unhappy or wish the survey painted a different picture, that will be okay. Because as I like to say at these conferences, you have to face it to fix it. Now, those are my remarks. Let me introduce and bring to the stage Dr. Hunter Bacot, the director of the UALR Institute on Government.
To begin, I'm new to Little Rock and new to Arkansas, but I'm a native Southerner, and so I am suffering from all the pollen as well. What I want to talk about is what brought me here. When looking into this position, I saw this featured racial attitudes survey, and that was promising in a number of ways. One, it opened up things for me. I would challenge you to find any other community in this country that engages this conversation about race. It's a tough topic most people avoid. Here we don't. We tackle it head on, and we can do so because of Chancellor Anderson's support year in and year out. What is more remarkable is we've done this for a decade. That takes a tremendous amount of courage. And so what I want to talk about is what we're doing with this conversation about race. I'm supposed to talk about this year's survey, but I can't because we are entering our second decade of these surveys about racial attitudes in this community. That is a remarkable feat, and we are very proud to be a part of it and participate in it. Part of this conversation is engaging the public and making it a community conversation, which we do every year with this conference. What is more fascinating is what we did last year. Again, Chancellor Anderson with his vision to make this a topic that we do engage because, as he says, we have to face it to fix it, and we do. Well, we've faced it. We're working on it. We're attempting to fix it. But what we are doing more than anything, we are extending this conversation beyond our community. Last year, we made an effort to put together the data sets and make those available on the internet. We did so. And I'm proud to announce this year, in the first year, we have had over 70 downloads of that data by nearly a dozen universities across the world. And that is something to be very proud of. Some of the universities, UC Berkeley, Spelman, Bethune-Cookman, Northern Illinois, Liberty University, and so the list goes on. And so what we have done is not only we've started this conversation here in Little Rock, and now we have moved that conversation to a community larger than us, the world's community. And I'm proud to be a part of that conversation. I'm glad you are here to be a part of that conversation, and I hope we can continue this conversation in perpetuity and move forward in the second decade better, stronger, and at least have the confidence to engage this conversation. Thank you, and I hope you do enjoy the results and the remainder of the program.
Thank you so much, Dr. Picard. Again, thank you for joining us today for what is bound to be a stimulating conversation about a topic that should have relevance and meaning to us all. We aim to fulfill three primary objectives. First, to draw upon and amplify what a representative sampling of Pulaski County residents shared on the subject of this year's survey regarding class, finance, and business. This is better captured in the report that will be available online at the Institute's website later today. An executive summary can be found in your printed program. Number two, to compare and contrast the survey data, which is perceptual in nature, with the economic realities of the county and state. This will mostly be provided in the overview presentation that will be given by my colleague, Michael Packo. And then third, to use today's discussion as a launching pad to help inform decision-making and policy directions that can chart a new future for Central Arkansas, much of which will fall in the laps of those who are assembled in this room today. So let's get started. It is my pleasure to invite to the podium the director of the UALR Institute on Economic Advancement and the state's economic forecaster, Dr. Michael Packo.
Oh, thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. As the state economic forecaster, it's nice to have an opportunity to talk about something other than the Arkansas economic outlook. Now, when Dr. Twyman approached me on this subject to begin with, I made it clear that I'm certainly no expert on race and ethnicity, but I am an economist and I know where to find the economic statistics. So what my role is here this morning is to talk about the survey area for which this survey took place, basically Pulaski County, both inside and outside of Little Rock, to talk about the economic opportunities that exist in Central Arkansas, how we've fared during the recession and recovery, and basically some facts about race and ethnicity and economic opportunity in Central Arkansas. So basically I'm going to talk about four brief topics, some economic characteristics of Pulaski County, some points about the experience that we've had during the recession of 2008-2009, and the subsequent economic recovery. A little bit about the demographics and economic features of Central Arkansas, and then to conclude with some hard facts about black and white comparisons in economic opportunity and outcomes. So to begin with, I want to look at personal income per capita, as a matter of fact. This is one measure by which Arkansas compares itself to the rest of the nation on a frequent basis. Specifically, the incomes in Arkansas are about 81% of the national average. That has been the case for the past couple of years. We've made a lot of progress, but we're still considerably below the rest of the nation in terms of per capita personal income. Now, within the state, there are some different regions. Here, the darker blue are the wealthier counties. Kind of the light orange counties are the lower income counties. And as a matter of fact, those the light orange ones are in the range of around 55 to 65% of the national average income. So they're considerably below the national average. Now, within this context, Pulaski County is actually something of an oasis of relative prosperity. There are 2 counties in Arkansas that are actually above the national average. Pulaski County at about 105% of the national average, and the other county down south, Union County, 106% of the national average. So generally speaking, Central Arkansas, including Saline County, Grant County, and even Faulkner, are above the norm for the state, quite a bit above the 81% average that characterizes income in the state as a whole. Now this chart, a lot of lines on it, compares the different sectors in the Arkansas economy with those of Pulaski County. So the red bars tell us what Arkansas looks like, the blue bars tell us what Pulaski County looks like in terms of their concentration in different areas. A reading above 1 means we're more concentrated than the national economy. A reading below 1 means we're less concentrated. So there are a couple of very interesting differences. For one thing, not surprisingly, Pulaski County is not very highly concentrated in natural resources and mining. We're also not very highly concentrated in manufacturing, and that is in contrast to the rest of the state. That has been to our advantage over the past decade or more as employment in manufacturing has been on a downward trend. Other parts of the state are highly concentrated in transportation and warehousing. Pulaski County, not so much. The areas where we really have higher concentrations are in the really the higher tech service sectors, financial activities, information services, and professional and business services. And those are typically the areas that require higher skills, higher educational levels, and result in higher pay. So that's part of what explains our per capita income situation. Here's something that's not literally economics, but population is a good measure of how a community is doing economically. Through the idea of revealed preference, people move to where economic opportunities exist. And as it turns out that since the census of 2010, between April of 2010 and 2013, the most recent population estimates, only 22 counties in the state of Arkansas have experienced positive population growth. So that's less than 1/3 of Arkansas counties have actually grown. Over 2/3 have shrunk in population. Now, of the 8 top counties in the state, Pulaski County is number 8, but 4 of those top 8 are in Central Arkansas, part of the Little Rock metropolitan area. And this is the breakdown of growth for those 4 counties that are in the top 8 and in Central Arkansas. One thing that characterizes Pulaski County's growth, at only 2.2%, it has grown a little bit slower than the rest of its neighbors, but much of the growth has been through natural growth, the blue part of the bar. That's the birth minus death rate. And the smaller part of the growth has been in net migration. Now, this is not unusual for the central city, the central county of a metropolitan area. It's typically the case that the central county has slower net migration, that the migration is toward the outlying counties, and that's true here as well. One interesting fact is that of that net migration, the domestic net migration is actually negative, and what makes up for that is international net migration. So we're having foreign immigrants move into Pulaski County, and that accounts for pretty much all the net migration growth. One thing that's different about Pulaski County compared to other central counties and metropolitan areas is that we are still growing. We're not seeing a hollowing out of the central county area like we see in many metropolitan areas. So it's still a healthy, positive growth rate. Now, looking at how we fared during the recession and recovery, it may surprise some people if you think back on it and recognize that it's been 5 years since we were in a recession. I talked to a lot of groups where people in the audience think we're still in a recession because it just doesn't feel like we've experienced a full economic recovery. Well, this chart compares payroll employment for the nation, the state, and Pulaski County. And you can see that the recession didn't hit Arkansas or Pulaski County nearly as hard as it did the rest of the nation. The decline in employment nationwide was about 6%, whereas for Arkansas and Pulaski County it was about 4%. But the recovery has been a good deal slower in Arkansas and in central Arkansas than it has been nationwide. We've seen slow but steady employment growth around the nation, but not very rapid growth when it comes to the Arkansas region. As it stands right now, the U.S. is still 1% below employment levels that prevailed at the beginning of the recession. In comparison, Arkansas is still 2.5% below the beginning of recession levels, and Pulaski County is 3% below. So it's been a painfully slow economic recovery. And the next slide is another illustration of that property. The unemployment rates, again, we didn't suffer nearly as much as the rest of the country. The unemployment rate peaked nationwide at over 10%. It was 8% in Arkansas, and the highest it ever got in Pulaski County was about 7.3%. But we really haven't seen a whole lot of progress in bringing those unemployment rates down in Arkansas. It's still, at the end of last year, it was 7.5% in Arkansas. It's come down over the first couple of months of this year since this chart hasn't been updated. But Pulaski County, the most recent data we have available, the unemployment rate was still about 6.8% at the end of 2013. So it's only fallen about 0.5 percentage point from the peak during the recession years, or the early part of the recovery. Now, my next slide summarizes some demographic characteristics, and there's a lot of numbers here. I hope that these slides will be available later on, so you can peruse these at your leisure. But just a couple of points that I want to make about these statistics is that I've already talked about population growth, that Pulaski County has grown less than the U.S., but greater than the Arkansas average. One thing about the age of our population, it's typically noted that Arkansas has a very rapidly aging population, more retirees than other parts of the country. That's not true in Pulaski County. Here in central Arkansas, we're a little bit below the average. There's a much larger black population in central Arkansas, in Pulaski County and Little Rock in particular, than on average for either the state or the nation. In general, our population is better educated. We have higher income than the rest of Arkansas. I mentioned that before. And finally, way down at the bottom, retail sales per capita are much higher in Pulaski County than they are for the rest of the state or the nation, simply because Pulaski County, in the central location that it is kind of a shopping mecca. But that's an awful lot of numbers. Those are just the summary that I would pull away from those. I want to move on. The next slide looks at income and poverty. And the common theme that we're going to see in all these slides is that whether you're looking at black or white or male or female, generally speaking, Pulaski County is better off than the rest of the state, and generally speaking, better off than the rest of the nation, for that matter. So in terms of the income statistics here, we have median household income is higher in Pulaski County than for the U.S., and that's the case whether you're looking at black or white or Hispanic. Well, Hispanic is a little bit different, but in these cases, there's such a small sample size for the Hispanic population that we have to look at the entire metropolitan area, so they're not exactly comparable. The one distinction is that Pulaski County is better off than the rest of the nation. The other is that in terms of the economic outcomes, whites tend to fare better than blacks. The same thing is true when we look at the poverty rates. The poverty rate for the U.S., 13% for whites, 28% for blacks. When you looked at Pulaski County, comparable for blacks, but lower for whites. So, but definitely better than Arkansas. So in this case, when you look at poverty rates, Pulaski County again follows that notion that we're kind of an oasis of prosperity within a relatively low income state. The next slide shows unemployment rates. And again, the same two common features emerge from looking at these numbers. One is that unemployment rates are lower in Pulaski County than they are for the state or the nation as a whole, and that unemployment rates are considerably higher for blacks as opposed to whites, over twice as high in many cases. The Hispanic unemployment rates, a little bit different, much lower than the national average, both for Arkansas as a whole and for Pulaski County. Now, these last two slides have shown the differences in economic outcomes. And I think one of the major factors that explains these outcomes in terms of economic opportunities is summarized in the next slide, and that is educational attainment. Now, I just have here for white and black, and this is for Pulaski County, and compared with the United States and Arkansas. So we have the blue is United States, red is Arkansas, green is Pulaski County. And we see the same patterns here that we saw in those economic outcomes, income, poverty, and employment. That is that we're better off in Pulaski County than the statewide averages. That is, we have higher levels of income, higher levels of high school completion, higher levels of college completion, higher levels of graduate degrees. And that's true whether you're looking at blacks or whites. The difference in comparing the two panels here is that there is a lower level of educational attainment among blacks than there is for whites. So you see, even though things are better in Pulaski County than the state as a whole, high school graduation rates are lower for blacks than for whites, lower level of bachelor's degrees, lower level of graduate degrees. And this is very important because if you eliminate race from this analysis altogether, educational attainment is very highly correlated with economic opportunity and outcomes. Just looking at some statistics from last year, unemployment rates for people who have less than a high school graduate are around 10%. If you have a high school degree, it's about 6%. If you have a college degree, a little under 6%, or if you have some college, that is. If you have a bachelor's degree, the unemployment rate nationwide is only 3.4%. That's a significant difference from the failure to graduate from high school. Earnings is similar. If you have less than a high school degree, you'll earn on average 27% less than a high school graduate. Whereas if you have a bachelor's degree, you'll earn 70% more than a high school graduate. So when it comes to looking at education attainment and economic outcomes, there's a very clear correlation there, and the differences that we see among racial and ethnic groups can often be attributed back to that fundamental issue of educational attainment. And that's my summary of the Pulaski County economic environment and some statistics on race and ethnicity. I hope that this helps ground the panel discussion that's upcoming here. We'll talk about racial attitudes based on the survey, and we'll have some basis in economic facts to inform that discussion. Thank you very much.
Again, thank you, Dr. Packo. You provided the perfect segue for the discussion that we're about to have. And if we are ready and without any further ado, I will start to introduce this stellar group of individuals onto the stage, onto the red carpet. First is Ms. Maria Elena de Avila. She serves as a career specialist with the Arkansas Department of Career Education. Mr. Darrin Williams, Chief Executive Officer of Southern Bancorp and Arkansas State Representative. Ms. Heather Larkin, President and CEO of the Arkansas Community Foundation. Mr. Fred Love, who is a grants administrator for Pulaski County and also an Arkansas State Representative. Ms. Carmen Parks, Diversity Marketing Sales with the Little Rock Regional Chamber of Commerce. Dr. Terry Richard, he is the LULAC, which is the League of United Latin American Citizens State Director and also a sociology professor at UALR. And to keep us all on task is our celebrity moderator, the incomparable State Senator Joyce Elliott.
And one of the things I always like to remind people of when the discussion is about race is, of course, it can be charged, but that's no reason for us not to have our discussions. But the other thing we tend to do so many times is sabotage ourselves, because we don't give space for people to just make ridiculous mistakes. And when we talk about something like this is going to happen, and let's recognize that if we're ever going to have a discussion where people can feel some level of comfort, Joyce Elliott's probably going to say something that she's unaware of that may be offensive and didn't mean it that way. And give me an opportunity and the space to learn. That's so important for us to do that. And I always look forward to these discussions because inevitably something along that line will happen, or somebody wants to jump up and punch somebody else, and we don't do that because we are, we are a center of nonviolence here, people. And we like to demonstrate that for everybody. I will tell you that, I came from a background that I really had a choice, and I could feel really, really good, like many of you, about being bitter about race. But you have a choice in these things. And a part of what this survey does, I think, is explore the possibility for those choices that we can move beyond. I went to a school where I was one of those only kids who was integrating a school. And it was tough. Many days it was awful. And the guy who was my major nemesis and I are now best friends, which is really great, I think. But I could give myself every reason in the world to hate that guy. And I think what this does is gives other people the opportunity to think about maybe something you're harboring, something you're doing or not doing, that could advance the cause of better racial attitudes in our area. So let's get with the questions. I feel kind of like Steve Harvey. Are you ready? The first question has to do with some of the things we found in census information. According to the U.S. Census information, Arkansas is the second poorest state in the union with a median income of $38,600. What will it take, in your estimation, to move our state from this unenviable position of having an income that probably should be at a higher level if we're doing all the things we need to do, and people are getting opportunities that they need to have, because we know a lot of what happens with class and money has to do with the opportunity gap. I think I'll start with you on this question, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Senator. And I'd also want to echo my thanks to the University of Arkansas Little Rock for continuing to make this issue front and center for our state and for our nation. I appreciate Chancellor Anderson, your leadership, Dr. Time, and your leadership as well on this issue. Senator, with regard to your question, I think there's a reason why, or it's always been said that education and economics are intricately intertwined. So if our median income is next to last, that's exactly where we are in college graduation rates. But for Mississippi, we'd be last on the latest stats that I've seen. So I think, obviously, if we want to increase our median income level, we need to do a better job of growing college graduates in the state of Arkansas. And I look at my generation, I'm 45, be 46 soon, and I count all of my friends who I can think of who went to Hendrix with Carmen and I. I'm a lot older than Carmen, she barely got there. So. But There's so many of them who don't live in Arkansas now. In fact, just this week I had a conversation with a friend of mine who's an outstanding student at Hendrix, who grew up in Pine Bluff but now lives in Chicago, and he's looking to change careers. And I said, would you consider coming back to Arkansas? And he laughed at me. And and I suggested he really consider that. And obviously one of the things that he had a concern about was the income level and the standard of living that he'd become accustomed to. And we're going to have to do something to change that. And that really begins with growing our college graduation rates. And I think that will go a long way in helping to increase that median income. We've got to obviously provide jobs when we graduate these students. But I think there's a reason why our education, our incomes are low, because also our education is low. So I think that's something we need to look at.
If you guys don't mind, I'm just going to use first names because this is supposed to be a conversation. Maria?
I agree with our speaker. Education in Arkansas is a very difficult thing. I have seen a lot of initiatives that are taking place now that are elevating the number of children going to any form of post-secondary education. I have seen schools doing things like graduation coach, career coach, reading specialist, all of those things. But I think education will be the key to Arkansas. To be able to compete for the jobs of the 21st century, we really need to be doing the things that those jobs require. And I think that Arkansas has already started conversations in many different levels to understand what business wants these days. I think that is also a very important thing. And thinking about race and how we see some disparities and some gaps in education, I think that all these initiatives that have already started taking place are going to help closing the gap. And I think it's also very important for the public in general to understand that when there is a segment of the population that doesn't have the educational levels that other segments have, that affects everybody. Because then there is less companies willing to move to Arkansas. There are a lot of things. So I think this really has to be an issue of every one of the people, of the residents of our state.
This is the one question I'm going to ask you all to weigh in on because I think it's so important, and we're going to move people forward, and have opportunity to do better economically. So why don't we just go over, Representative Fred, why don't you go next?
Good morning. I echo the sentiment that the two previous persons talked in regards to. I think we do need a world-class education system. Graduation rates are important. We need a strong, viable business community. And then we also need, number 3 is an educated and a healthy workforce. And I think these are the 3 things that really come together to actually drive economic and community development. But let me drill down just a little bit further, because some of the things that we just don't think about naturally, because these things just don't happen. And so when I look at things, and especially from a economic development standpoint, I look at things like a living wage. That's just an automatic stimulus to increasing the income in Arkansas. If we had a living wage, if we had a better minimum wage, that would actually just lift incomes up. Number 2, and more importantly, I think there's segments of the community, and looking at the numbers that Dr. Paco presented, when it got to African Americans and Hispanics, I think we need to begin to be more intentional in creating the opportunities for businesses of color to do businesses with government. And sometimes that can be a catalyst for actually growing businesses within our communities. And what I mean, for instance, is that there's, at the state level, we renew contracts over and over, and they're done with the same people over and over. Well, how do you expect for other businesses to grow in minority communities to provide opportunities and get paying jobs to citizens if we don't provide those opportunities. And so those are some of the things that I think that we need to be more intentional about. Because if we grow minority businesses, that will help the minority community. Thus, actually, we can begin to divert some of the resources that we've put into our jails, we put into our prison system to doing more positive educational things. And I think the dots will connect. It's just that we have to be intentional about connecting the dots.
Well, I like the notion of the intentionality of it all because, as like there are three of us on this stage who are legislators, we just happen to have to work with a whole bunch of other people, 132 more, that if we were intentional about our policies, to follow up what you were talking about, and if business were more intentional about doing the kind of things that Dr. Anderson alluded to regarding UALR and the construction, this could be a direct line to what you're talking about. I'm going to come back over here and improve on this. Okay.
I'll add three things, and kind of the last one will jump back over to education. One, I think that we have the leadership to change those numbers. I'm not so sure that we always have the desire. I think there's at times a culture in Arkansas to say, it's good enough for me. I did okay, my kids will be okay. And I don't know that there's, at the top of leadership there is, but I don't know if we've got a real culture to move those numbers. I hope I'm wrong. But then jumping back to education, I agree with everything that's been said. I would add to that the necessity to start with the high school graduation rates. I think Arkansas lags behind in high school graduation rates. If you can't graduate from high school, then you are pretty much doomed to live in poverty. To increase high school graduation rates, I think we've got to go all the way back to early childhood education. Kids who enter third grade and cannot read, 65% of those kids will not graduate from high school. And so it's where to start, plug the whole college, high school, early childhood. But I think if we really, really want to make a difference, we start in pre-K, we start 0 to 3 years old, we get those kids reading, get books in their hands, so that by third grade they've got the numbers to, or the ability to succeed. They get out of high school, then we can get them in college and really, really move those numbers. That's what I would add.
But it sounds like the opportunity gap starts at the point of birth.
Absolutely. I think the research shows us more and more, and I know there are experts in the room that know more than I, but it's by the time a kid's 3, lots of things have been set. And so with all the good work, and we should continue to do it. I believe in working in high school and at the college level completely, but we're kind of plugging holes. We're playing catch up by that time. And if we're going to move upstream, as we talk about in philanthropy, and really try to solve the problem, yes, Joyce, we've got to start with kids in the homes and providing support to those families and starting there. So,
Richard, your thoughts?
I wish I was more optimistic about the pace of change, and I'm going to piggyback and note that education is going to be a critical component in terms of the types of jobs that will be created and be available. But just as Dr. Paco noted, that there is a net loss of population from more than 2/3 of the counties here in the state of Arkansas, and that we've gained a little bit. We also have an issue with the fact that there isn't the type of infrastructures to support a lot of businesses. Many of our best qualified individuals leave out of state. They don't stay here. We have a brain drain. We take some in from the rural areas. In many cases, they're leaving to go out. And again, had we, there's certainly the movement to kind of consolidate many of the school districts, because we have a lot of overlap with administration and stuff that really kind of waste the minimal resources that we have. And within the universities, I think there is a move. There are initiatives to really improve the type of training available, certainly hard science, information technology. But I think in the state of Arkansas, we miss one of the things that might really generate, a new thrust, and that is that we are a natural state. There's so much beauty here in the state, and we have, I don't know if there's any college that actually offers a degree in tourism, something to really try to attract individuals into our state And every area of the state has something that they can really market. And it really requires, one, it requires an investment, and I think that the state has a role to play in terms of what we call R&D, research and development. And again, to get back to kind of my more pessimistic view, we happen to be at a point in our history where more conservative voices are really trying to reduce the impact that our state and investments can have in R&D, and really trying to promote the types of jobs that would attract individuals and keep individuals in our state. And in many cases, we're not taking advantage of some of the few things that would actually create a better job market for Arkansans.
Every one of you said something regarding education, and I have a little pushback I want you to think about regarding education. Not that it's not important, it absolutely is. But we're at a point now where it's so fashionable for people to question even the value of a college degree, which bothers me some in a state where we know we need to be talking about college degrees as much as anything else. And then sometimes people will have a very legitimate pushback to say, depending when we get into the race and class, especially race. So if you are an African American, let's say in our county, or you are Latino in our county, you can get as educated as some folks say as you want to be. Where is the opportunity? Which makes it difficult to try to keep convincing people that education is really, really important. What would you say to somebody who puts that back at you, other than the natural thing, well, you'd be worse off if you didn't have an education? Well, what's the responsibility of the folks in this audience? What's the responsibility of people who have the ability to make these changes? After we say get educated, then where's the opportunity?
I think when we make these young people, or many times the parents, see where it can be. For example, in the Hispanic community, there is a strong tendency to have skilled jobs such as carpentry or plumbing, those type of jobs. And they have done very well. Some of those people have done very well, but let's say there are no many Hispanics that do city, state, or federal contracts. They don't know how to write those bids and those type of things. So when you open the possibilities and enlarge their vision on what could happen when you have a higher level of education, how your dreams can come true if you do these things this way or approach things this way, I think I have seen that vision moves a lot of the barriers when people start seeing what could be different.
All right, anybody else want to weigh in on that? Richard?
Well, of course, for Latinos, it's interesting because for these first wave of immigrants that have come in, many of them are working in what we call high labor intensive jobs. But when we interview them, they know they don't want their children to be working the same jobs they do. They want them to do something better. And ironically, what we note when I just looked at, went over to the med school, and something like 1.5% of the entering class were Latinos. Slightly over 4% of that entering student physician class were African American. And at the same time, within the expanding healthcare industry, and in terms of who they're hiring for doctors and nurses, et cetera, increasingly we have a high number of foreign-born individuals that we're recruiting in and being given visas, which tells us that we are not actually investing in our own children to make sure that they have those opportunities to really move up and serve all Arkansans, but particularly those individuals in their community. There is no reason that we cannot focus on children who even come from poor environments, and particularly among immigrants. We know that they have a high motivation that they want their kids to succeed, just as among African Americans, et cetera. But in many cases, it's the lack of resources, what we call a lack of social capital, that really hinders them. And in many cases, we do not have the right approach to really ensure that we produce our own children and give them every opportunity to excel and to really develop those talents that we know they can serve our own community.
All right.
I'll say something. I don't have a good answer to that, but I do think in our enthusiasm to talk about addressing poverty, sometimes I don't think we ever stress the importance of a college education at all, but it sounds like we do, and that is not the answer for everybody. I do think we as a state, certainly as a local community, have a responsibility to train our people, our young people, in the jobs that we have. So some career planning. I know UALR is doing a great job of that. Pulaski Tech does a great job. There are other avenues. And I can't really address, I know that a lot of individuals out there that can't find a job, and they're highly educated, and they're young people, and they're eager, and I don't have an answer for that. But then I think of the big picture and what I hear out in the state of companies that say, we've got jobs, we just don't have the right people to fill them. And there's got to be some really good discussion, and I know there is. That discussion's happening all over the state, and in particular at the higher education institutions and community colleges, of trying to match that training and workforce with the jobs that we have. And I think that's pretty much what you were saying, but those are my thoughts on it.
Well, that's a good segue to the next question. So if anybody wants to kind of come back to that, that'll be fine. But we've got to move to the next question. That is a bit of a drill down on the first one. The number of persons living below the poverty rate from 2008 to 2012 was 18.7% in the state and 17.2% in Pulaski County. Solutions that you thought of that might reverse this trend, not necessarily of unemployment, because that's a part of it, but reversing the trend of poverty. This is more specific. What might some ideas be on that issue? Anybody who wants to start?
Joyce, I'll start, but I'd like to back up just a second.
Okay, I knew you would.
You know I would. To your last question about, we know that a college education is important. In fact, over the life of an individual, statistics show that it's worth about $1 million more, and so that's important. But what about the opportunities? One thing I think we need to do a better job of, and it's happening much more in Central Arkansas, is that's really promoting entrepreneurship. And you see a lot more business incubators, what's happening in North Little Rock and also here in Little Rock. So I'm excited to see that we are really promoting entrepreneurship, trying to grow jobs and create jobs. And so that's a plus. What you don't see as much growing right now throughout Arkansas are the sources of capital to invest in these new ventures. We used to have many more venture funds that we have now that would take a chance on a good business idea. And so I'm hopeful that we'll see more and more capital sources to take advantage of this. And of course, since I'm a banker and Southern Bancorp is part of our mission to really grow jobs, I'm excited about what we're seeing about encouraging entrepreneurship. I'm also hopeful that we'll see more people willing to step up and provide access to capital, government and other sources, because this is risky capital, and it has to be patient capital because these businesses often don't succeed right away. But I'm excited that you're seeing much more effort around entrepreneurship today.
Is there a racialized undercurrent in that, Darrin?
Oh, absolutely.
Let's
absolutely.
talk about it.
No, absolutely. Access to capital for people of color it's much more difficult for people of color and low-income people and rural people. Of course, Southern Bancorp really is focused on rural America, the Delta. The amount of money that poor, particularly people of color, pay for just basic financial services is unbelievable. It's about often 10% of their income, the same amount you spend on your groceries. So poor people spend much, where many people, the majority of communities, actually may make money on their financial services. In fact, last year, the predatory financial services industry was a $100 billion industry. So you think about poor people who are unbanked or underbanked, they pay for cashier's checks to pay bills. They pay extremely high rates at predatory and payday lenders to borrow small amounts of money In fact, a recent study by the Pew Institute showed that the average payday loan is about $350, and it's intended to last until the next payday. Of course, if you didn't have $300 2 weeks before, you probably don't have $350 this next payday, and so, but I might have $50 to roll that check over, and so I end up rolling that over. What intended to be a 2-week loan now becomes a 5-month loan. Now I've paid $1,000 for a $350 loan, so now there are just not many places that a person who does not have access to responsible capital and credit can go to get $350, other than a payday lender or something like that. And so access to capital and credit obviously exacerbates the problem of poverty in our state, because poor people pay so much more for basic financial services, and it means so much more to their incomes, where many people actually make money in their banking relationships.
Okay, others, as I know all of you probably have strong thoughts on this one, as you want to talk about.
Well,
this is about poverty.
Well, I can touch on, and that was a good piece that Representative Williams said, because I can talk, firsthand, and not firsthand on trying to secure capital to start a business, but firsthand on having talks in regards to micro lenders. I held a series of meetings with micro lenders and the state, and the mindset of some of the persons that work for the state is pretty much not an entrepreneurship mindset. And so therefore, when you begin to have meetings and you have persons that are looking for capital, it makes it much more difficult, because the mindset is not entrepreneurship, it's how do I protect these resources. And while that is a valid argument, the fact of the matter is, if you don't begin to get that capital flowing, then we won't even have the opportunities to develop these businesses. And so the mindset of some of the persons that can affect these changes, we have to begin to cultivate a more entrepreneurial mindset, so that we can create some of these opportunities to invest capital. And I think the state and the city and other entities like that can play a vital role in this.
Okay, so entrepreneurship is one idea. What else do we need to do?
Oh, wait a minute, you didn't. Oh no, I was just getting started.
I kind of had that feeling. Others, Richard.
Well, just that that's a very high rate of poverty when you're talking about 18-17%, and social scientists will tell you that the impact of poverty is devastating on, for children growing up in the poverty situation. The opportunities for them are diminished. In many cases we know that poverty impacts language development. It impacts on, how well individuals obviously perform in school, how often they get sick. In other words, to allow a high level of poverty actually creates disadvantages that are almost impossible to overcome. In fact, every once in a while you get people that do overcome it, which shows you the resiliency of human beings. But part of the issue is that the United States as a whole, as an industrialized country, has the highest poverty rate of any industrialized country in the world, which means we allow poverty to exist. And in many cases it does take government action to really, both at a federal and a state level, to really attack it. And once again, we don't see that type of initiative within the federal government or the state to really address those issues and really look at what the impact of poverty does to individuals, and to the fact that it creates a whole series of problems associated with crime, violence, predatory behavior, lack of educational achievement. All of those things are really devastating to the state, but it's also devastating for the nation as a whole.
Richard, do you see any movement beyond the federal or state government? Is there responsibility beyond that, say in the private sector, to try to engage this elimination or reduction of poverty? What's the role of people sitting out here today, or where they're going to go back to work, or their communities, in addressing the issue as well?
Well, it kind of reminds me of George H.W. Bush's 1,000 Points of Light, but where I do think, because of the way our society is structured, where we do not kind of develop the type of safety net that exists in other industrialized nations, that in many cases I think that appeal to private industries and corporations is a good approach to really, and some do have what we call a human face of capitalism in them, and that would be a good way of saying, you know, we want to develop human capital, you know, that it's the human beings we want, and really to approach in a novel way ways of ensuring that those that are the most disadvantaged but still have talents, that they can be tapped and they can be utilized within the state and within the nation.
So whoever responds next, would you include in a part of your answer your thoughts about the attitudes that we tend to have toward people in poverty or poor people, and how those attitudes might affect what we choose to do or not choose to do? Carmen?
Yeah, I think attitude is very important, especially here in Arkansas. There was a quote, I think by Reverend King, that anything that affects you indirectly, or if it doesn't affect you directly, it affects you indirectly. And I think from the business community standpoint, poverty affects any business that wants to move here, because you're looking at whether to move to Arkansas if there's a higher level of crime, or if there's the labor pool is not where it needs to be. So while that business may be booming on paper, it's affecting them indirectly with those type of tangent issues. So I would answer it in that way.
Okay.
This is an interesting question. I want to kind of skip back to your question about what we as individuals can do to address poverty, because we've worked on that at the Community Foundation. You talk about addressing poverty, and it's just overwhelming. And we have to look to government and policy a lot, and we certainly support that. But what can we do? And the foundation has partnered with UALR, and they've helped us really identify through research and indicators 3 primary drivers of poverty, and it's high school graduation rates, stable families, not having babies when you're 15, and if you do, having the support to graduate from high school and go on and support your family, and then earning capacity. And then we talk about at the foundation what we can do as individuals in local communities, and you can do it a lot through philanthropy. While supporting your government and your representatives and making big policy changes, each one of us can do things. Mentoring programs, nothing is more important than one-on-one time with young people of all colors, but in particular our young black kids. They need mentors, after-school programs, reading programs, anything that will move them forward. Give your time and your talent and your treasure to those types of nonprofits. On stable families, Arkansas Single Parent Scholarship, daycare resources, again, giving your time to help read to kids after school when parents are trying to work 2 jobs. These things really, really do make a difference. Increasing earning capacity. There's all types of good organizations that are working in the nonprofit sector. Economics Arkansas, to name one. Financial literacy type classes. The business community, and they have done it actually, but to rally around financial literacy and helping small business owners and single moms and single dads really learn how to balance a budget and what a savings account is and why they need a IDA or something like that. So I do think there's a role for individuals to play, and I'm so glad you asked that question, and challenge all of us to think about what we can do in a small way to address the big issue of poverty.
Well, let me just put another little spin on this, and I don't need an answer from everybody. I'm going to say something here that is my perception, and then you can tell me whether or not I've fallen off the railings. I suspect that one of the reasons we tend to be dismissive of people who are in poverty, and then many times blame them, it's almost a sport now to I think blame people for being poor. And I'm not saying people don't have some opportunity to move out of their situations at times. But here's my suspicion, is that we can be dismissive of poverty in a lot of ways and always look to blame that person or look to somebody else because of the face we put on poverty. I suspect it's because the faces we put on poverty are black and brown. And now we know empirically the numbers of folks who live in poverty, are much higher in our state, and I don't know about Pulaski County necessarily. But what do you think about the notion of the power of what we see when we think poverty, and whether or not we are moved to do something about it, or whether or not we are moved to say this is unacceptable and I have a responsibility? The report backs up what we know, that there's a higher percentage of blacks and browns who are living in poverty. Of course, obviously, we're not the majority. But for years, we have painted that picture of the Cadillac queen and that kind of business, starting, I think, maybe back in the 80s. Am I wrong about this, do you think? Am I just making up stuff? Am I just being overly sensitive?
No, it's, there's no doubt that given what we have seen in political campaigns where there's discussions of the takers, and the people that they don't want to do anything, that invariably these are very often subtle hints that, we're talking about minorities, about blacks. And even though that we know that, say, 50% of individuals that receive welfare may be white, those are facts that are unknown among the general population, and that there is an attempt to color the face of poverty and therefore move individuals to reduce the amount of help. Precisely what I said is the opposite of what we need to do in terms of investing in, every individual to make sure that their talents are truly developed. We have a tendency to label individuals, and because of often the ascribed lower status of minorities, that by targeting them and making poverty seem to be the face of blacks and browns, then it makes it easier for the dominant group to actually develop legislation, both statewide as well as federally, to cut those particular funds.
I'm just thinking, some of the policies that we've attempted to put in place, for example, testing people because they are on Medicaid, that kind of thing. And how does that, because if you're on Medicaid, you're poor. How does that give you an opportunity? Those are the kind of questions I think about. How does that advance anything if you're going to continue to do things such as that? There are other questions here. I'm going to move on to the next question. And this one, I'm going to just paraphrase it like this, but basically the question is, we tend not to live, if you're a lower income citizen and a higher income citizen, we tend not to live among one another. And the question is about the impact of that. How does that affect the ability for folks to be upwardly mobile if you're not seeing what other people are doing, if you're not interacting with them? And so if this education is the engine of mobility, does it matter in that we live, lower income folks, near to or close by in some way, higher income folks? What impact do you think that has on opportunity, and is there a racialized aspect to that?
Joyce, the 100 Black Men of America is an organization I'm affiliated with. We have a slogan that you can't be, really focused on young black boys, can't be what they can't see, which is really powerful. And so that's why it's important to piggyback on some of the things that Heather was saying, that we get involved, the community gets involved, all parts of the community gets involved with kids, with the mentorship programs, with whatever it may be, because it is very difficult for people who, anyone, whatever economic stratosphere you may be in, to dream of to being something that you cannot see or you have not seen. The opportunity gap is really powerful when you think about how now with technology you can sit in your home and on your computer and really go all across the world. But if at home you have no computer and you have no access to the internet, you're very limited to what you see and you can touch. And we see this play out in standardized testing. We see it play out in a number of ways. So I think it's very powerful that we really divide ourselves sometimes along economic lines, and we don't have the interaction necessary really to allow everyone to dream differently. And I think it's just as important for poor and minority people poor people and who may be a minority to see other things, as well as it is for people who may be more affluent, to see how others live, to create some level of compassion, maybe, and some hopeful dialogue, interaction between the two, because we can all learn from each other. But I think you're very, very correct that this divide really probably hampers the ambition and the dreams of many people.
Yeah, I think perhaps there is a liability to privilege if we're not careful about it.
Sure.
And to be fair to this question too, it does drill down further to ask us even about the schools that kids attend. If a part of upward mobility is about the education kids get, and you live in different areas, your kids go to different type schools. Your kids go to schools where some are much better than others. And if you don't think that's true, everybody, people will say they want a neighborhood school, until sometimes it's their neighborhood school their kids have to go to, and then it's a different story. Or if you live in a neighborhood where you love the school and somebody says, oh, by the way, now this year your child is going to be assigned over here, then you get a whole different attitude. How much does it matter that we are living among each other and teaching our kids and making sure everybody has great schools? How much does it matter to opportunity? Which schools you go to, even at the elementary level? Does it matter? You have a young son.
Yes, it matters. I'm thinking about, I do believe it matters, and it's, where I gather this from is because I'm a representative for Southwest. And if you look at the schools that are there, they're primarily dilapidated. I was actually at a facility study last night, and they were rating how people felt about McClellan. And the ratings were were terrible. And
about the physical facility?
About the physical facility. But that plays into how people feel about the community. And if I want my kid to go to McClellan, well, things could be going well in McClellan, but the perception is things are not so good at McClellan because it looks the way it looks. And then the way it looks is I say it plays into, people think it plays into how people feel in the community. And so I think it does matter, because if I were just firsthand thinking, would I send my child to McClellan? The first thing I would probably think is no, because we always want the best for our kids. But that implores me to actually work harder for the schools out in Southwest Little Rock to ensure that not only are what's going on inside is reflective, but I want it to be better on the outside. The facilities, I want world-class facilities, because I want my kid to be among the people. I don't want to have to take my kid from where I am and bus him somewhere else, so that I feel like he's getting a world-class education. So yes, I think it is.
And so the price you would pay for that is making sure there's upward mobility in every neighborhood, perhaps, so that every school could be an upwardly mobile school. I will ask you also, because if we had upward mobility in our neighborhoods and the schools reflected that, this might not be a question that would be appropriate to ask, and I think I want to ask it rhetorically to the audience as well. Do you think it's important for upward mobility and for better racial relations? Is it imperative that our kids go to racially and economically diverse schools? Is that an imperative if we're going to get to where we want to go? It's rhetorical only for the audience.
I think it's extremely important, but it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is having access to a good school, regardless of who's sitting next to you. But down the list a little bit, I do think it's important for us as a state and a community to build those bridges and build those social capital between communities. And so I I think it's important, but it's not the most important.
Okay, so we're gonna settle on that, but that's really not my question.
Oh,
Let's just say schools are good. Everybody wants great schools. Is it important to upward mobility? Because that's what we're talking about here. Is it important for upward mobility for kids to go to integrated schools, socially, economically, and so forth?
I think so.
Okay.
Yes.
And the rest of the answer to that is because what?
Because I think, I think there is a piece of human nature. We all tend to group together, whether we're black, white, Methodist, Baptist, or whatever. And so, if we don't start young, building social capital and understanding that, Darrin and I are friends. We may not look alike, but we have that bond. Then yes, it's very important. So that when he's running a Fortune 500 company and I apply for a job, he doesn't look at the color of my skin or my gender, and because we started early. I think it behooves society for us to have that comfort level.
All right.
Can I add something to that?
Oh, let me go with Carmen first. Because
I just wanted to say, I think it's very important in that we are going to a global society, especially in this computer age. I will regress though and say, of course, my parents and past generations went to racially segregated schools and did very well due to resources that we had through their teachers and that type of thing. But in this current day, with the global community, if you're not able to compete with someone in a different country that may be looking at coming and starting a business in Arkansas, that could be an issue. So we have to make sure that our students have that aptitude as far as their, what they're learning in school, but also who they're going to be working with or working for or competing with.
Yeah, okay. Richard?
Well, it's, I think it's a great idea. In many cases, when you send students to schools, the students, when they're initially mixing, are often unaware of, the backgrounds that they're coming from, but very quickly they kind of pick it up in terms of the cues as to, what class or whatever they come from. And I think even among all of us or those in the audience, that like I grew up in a segregated society, a segregated area in Houston, Texas. I find it just one of the neat things about our society that it's evolved. So I have Asian, African American, Latino, and white friends, that I can interact with. Now, they all seem to come from the same, spectrum of class, so that I don't really have individuals that come from who are poor. And I think that is basically what happens. It doesn't mean we can't interact, but whether you're white, black, red, brown, or yellow, often the individuals you run around with seem to have similar occupations or similar professional activities, and that's kind of a key factor. I think it's good to be with all different types of groups of individuals. I do know that I like looking at some of the high schools. You can almost identify individuals in terms of where they come from by how they wear their pants. That there's a style. And that style often is as well as a diction, and whether you're white, black, red, brown, or yellow. I just got finished having a Latino group and saw a couple of guys, and I'm going, man, you're going to have to change, the way you dress and stuff when you wind up coming to college, but that it identifies them. There's a kind of a label that's placed on them, which is often seen as downwardly mobile. This is not going to help them in their pursuit of upwardly mobile activities like you're talking about.
I think it's really important because this study was actually, class was such a component of it, and I think even among just say a homogeneous group, racial group, we still tend to divide ourselves class-wise. I think is the case because I know there's a trend now. Everybody wants to do what's best for their kids. I never criticize anybody for that. But generally speaking, as more and more people have wanted to do what's best for their kids, that's leading to more and more of a class divide I've seen in our country, in our county. All right, next question, guys. When it comes to moving up in life, it may not be what you do, but where you live. Do you feel this is an important factor as to why Arkansas was ranked 6th from the bottom of the Gallup Healthways Wellbeing Index of 2013? And if so, how are we as a city, county, and state addressing the issue of whether or not it's where you live, not necessarily what you do?
Well, there is, I think many times in the what could be considered more affluent neighbors, there are better systems in place. There is better public light, there is better parks, there are better, the streets are better paved. Even the schools that are in the neighborhood, some of the schools in the Little Rock, high schools in the Little Rock school district have extremely low graduation rates compared to others. So those things influence. Also, when you are talking with peers that don't know about opportunities, how can you take advantage? Many times students learn from other students because the father is more knowledgeable and can, so the student is going to enter this program and he tells his peers. And of course there are a lot of initiatives that I have seen taking place that are trying to eradicate these problems and are trying to improve the graduation rates and ensuring that there are more children graduating from high school and giving them the tools to do so and to move to any form of post-secondary education. But I think when you interact with people of different races and you see and you hear about opportunities that maybe you don't know because where your parents interact, there are no these opportunities coming, and you learned, then you also think, I think I want to do that too. And so I think that at times when you are, let's say, in a school that has extremely low graduation rates, that the culture is doing low skill jobs, then moving that is going to be difficult.
Right. It's not what you do. It's where you live that decides upward mobility. That's the question here.
Joyce, can I respond
sure.
a little bit to that, to the geography question? I think that's very important. I think if you look at the United States, you look at these income levels we talk about, we're going to see clearly stats show that the South, the levels of income are not nearly as high in the South. But even if you drill down within the South, you look at Arkansas. 50 years ago, the Delta was king. Cotton was king. And the most affluent part of the state.
We even had a hot dog.
We did.
Okay.
We did. The most affluent part of the state, the most economically upwardly mobile part of the state was the agricultural base, Delta, with the mechanization of the family farm, and so many small farmers leaving and multi-national farms taking over. And not the need for the labor force. You see a migration toward now northwest Arkansas and somewhat central Arkansas is keen from an economic standpoint. So geography matters. You see more and more people leaving rural America, so much more out-migration. And it's hard to get young people to go back home to the family farm. I mean, right now in America, 65 farmers, there are more farmers 65 and older than there are 35 and younger. But I think it's really important when we think, and I'm really breaking this down to rural versus urban, not just but it's very important that we think about and care for rural America because it provides so much that we need. And just a couple of months ago, the Secretary had a chance of meeting with at the Rockefeller Foundation and talking with Secretary of Agriculture Bill Sack, and he really kind of drilled down on what rural America means. And you start thinking about that. Well, only 16% of the population may live there. I'm not sure if that's right, but 40% of our military comes from rural America. 50% of our food supply comes from rural America. And if you think that's not important, you think about how little we pay. We are as a nation, a very food secure nation. Now, there are pockets where we do have food insecurity, but as a nation, we're very food secure, and that's really because of what happens in rural America on the farm, and how much we as American citizens pay for food compared to more food insecure countries really is minimal. And that has obviously an impact on family, economics and what you pay. So it does really matter, and it does it very well dictates your income level and what you may be by where you live, unfortunately. But we need to really think about that and really think is that a good policy? I say to my friends from Northwest Arkansas, I'm really happy that they are doing well, but don't forget when cotton was king, and we need to think about that's a fight we, as you know, and Frederick, we have in the legislature. It's not really often sometimes there are racial fights, but more often they're geography fights within the legislature, if the state's going to move forward, the South is going to move forward. We really, I think, bigger than my part of the state. So I think we need to really think about that.
All right. Other thoughts on this question? Matter where you live?
It does matter where you live, and a little different take on that. Numbers show your life expectancy is lower in some neighborhoods. I mean, just because you live in a certain neighborhood, statistically, you won't live as long because of health factors, and certainly education indicators show that too. So it does matter where you live. On that, I think it all goes back a lot to poverty and those issues and addressing those, but it does. I have to say on rural America, Darrin, I just agree with you so much. This is not race, but sometimes the attitude in the metropolitan and urban areas that rural doesn't matter and that those people should just move to the city just burns me up. It's so important, so thank you for bringing that up.
Does it matter to you where you live in Little Rock, folks on this side?
Well, I wanted to focus on where you live and things like food deserts and getting back into poverty and nutrition that helps our young students be able to go to school and compete. If you just think about Little Rock, there are certain areas you can go and you cannot find much fresh fruit or the things you may find in a West Little Rock Kroger. You can, but it may be higher or just more difficult to access. So I think where you live from the aspect of that, we're talking about food and agriculture, just that one thing alone can affect poverty and our children and their ability, as well as obesity, childhood obesity, and those things that affect us. So.
Frederick, if you were to look at any of the neighborhoods in Pulaski County, do you think you could predict by just looking at that neighborhood without doing, say, a big study, whether or not the folks are upwardly mobile or not based on the neighborhood they're living in?
I do believe that you could do that, and it's just, I think everybody touched on it. It's just in regards to what is actually going on there. But I want to back up because I didn't read the question as you all interpreted. I read the question more about is what we are doing in these communities versus where you're from. And to me, I think that it's imperative that our leadership begins to work on what they can do in those communities to improve, so therefore people don't have to move out. But I do think that the question that you asked me is right on. I do think that you could look at things that are like such as food deserts or different things and say, hey, you know what? I can locate where the most unhealthy kids are. I can locate where there is going to be increase in crime and increase in just different indicators that are just based. Are poverty driven. So yes, I believe that, but I believe that our leaders also need to begin to work on. We have to have progressive leadership in order to lead our small rural communities out of these factors, so that you can come from a small, sweet home, College Station. When you begin to be more progressive, in your thoughts and what you do in community and economic development, you can make it more attractive so that these indicators, we will begin to suppress these indicators. So I think that it's critical the type of leadership that you do have so that they can begin to lead these communities out of where it's where you live and not what you do.
Can you change, if we know that that neighborhood where you live is predictive of your upward mobility opportunities, leadership is an important thing. How do we, once we say we've got great leadership, it's going to take some other people cooperating with leaders.
Correct.
What do we need to do? What's attitudinal or anything else, Richard, that we don't want people to have to say you have to leave your neighborhood to be okay. So what do we do? What needs to happen?
Well, it's interesting. I'm going to, focusing on Southwest Little Rock, and that the Latino community that has immigrated into there has been kind of a source of a rejuvenation. So whereas there was kind of a deterioration of many of the areas along Baseline and stuff, and now they have actually redeveloped. And that, and by the way, in terms of the crime rate, that reminds me of the police. I went on one of the police companion things once, and they used the term another 09er, because it's the zip code for Southwest Little Rock. And an 09er was either 4 white, 4 black, or Latino, automatically just labeling even the police that this is just a pattern that they see. But certainly among immigrants, looking at a larger level, there's no doubt that this, for these newest immigrants coming in, they're twice as likely as a native-born American citizen to actually become more engaged in entrepreneurship, to actually try to open something up. And I mean, they see this as, they've just left a place, and often in life-threatening situations. And so what's investment of this? This is, we're there. This is a life-changing thing. Mm-hmm. So they're willing to have that motivation to kind of invest in the area. But we also know that actually, for many Arkansans that leave the state, they achieve upward mobility. For international migrants who move to other nations, they're more likely to achieve upward mobility. So these migration patterns are kind of a tendency that tell you most likely who are risk takers, mm-hmm. who are willing to take a chance and really do something different. And in many cases, I think for the native population, they don't have that same sense of, let's focus on, a business or something we can take advantage of, So that is something where you really, education and making individuals aware that there are opportunities to invest in their community are keys.
Okay, so this next question here from 2008 to 2012, persons over the age of 25 who had a bachelor's degree in Pulaski County, we're going to concentrate here now, was 31.6%, and the state was 19.8%. What should be done to increase the number for both, especially as it relates to K-12 public education? What needs to be done to up those numbers for more higher people with degrees?
I'll take that since I didn't have my mic on at the beginning. I don't know if you all were able to hear me, but going to the K through 12, it is critical, as I think everyone on this panel stated earlier, that we focus on third grade and making sure our students can read so that they can compete in middle school and in high school. There are statistics that we have seen that show that a number of our students are not proficient when you start getting in middle school, which is critical. The Little Rock Chamber, one of the things that we have done to focus on getting our students ready is partnering with faith-based programs here, as well as a number of businesses, to make sure that each person that wants to volunteer can go 1 hour a week for 12 weeks and read with a student, so that those students will be able to read on the third grade level. So I think that's probably the biggest thing right now.
Okay, others?
Joyce, I think if we're serious about education, we really got to take a look at our model. The education model hadn't changed in a century. We're still educating our students based on agricultural calendar. We got a school in the summer because that's when the crops came in. Well, I haven't gotten a crop in a long time, neither have my kids. And we know that poor low-income students suffer tremendously during this summer period when they have no access to educational opportunity. Kids who are more affluent, who have more opportunities, they may be out in the summer, but they're engaged in educational programs that continue the enrichment. And when the summer's over and our kids go back to school, the low-income and minority kids who didn't have educational opportunities have fallen several months behind. And so the first several months, almost a half a year, is really just catching up. And so we're always playing catch up. And so we've got to really really think about this educational model. And I know that I'm not running for re-election. I'm term limited, so I can say things I may not say earlier. But and I know we've got vacations, we've got a lot of things planned. But if we're going to be serious about education, we really need to think about just the calendar. And then this educational model that we have really is a one-size-fits-all. No matter what the kid is shaped like going into the system, they have to come out on the other end looking in one of two ways, either career ready or college ready. And so we put kids shaped and built differently through the same model and expect them to come out. And we've got to have a personalized model for education for every kid, but kids are different. So if we want to increase this education rate, we have to make our system personalized for kids. We've got to really think about why we, just our calendar, why do we get off for these 3 months during the summer? I know we've got vacations, but we can vacation at different times, and we can do different things, and that may strike people differently, but we've really got to think about, is the system that was built 100 years ago still the right system for us to be using today? A lot of other things I can say on that, but it's just really clearly heavy focus on the STEM.
I suspect all of you have a lot to say on this one, so who wants to go? Heather?
I'll go. Amen with that. I'm with you on that. I'm going to take a different tack, though. I think one of the things that we can do in K-12 is really to work on setting the expectations that you will go to college. And I know in El Dorado, with the El Dorado Promise, they've done a lot of this. In kindergarten, those kids come in, they get a bag that says your college education is in the bag. And in that bag is information to take home to the parents to start then when they're 5, thinking that college is a possibility and should be a goal. Now, it's not a goal for everyone, and it's not a great fit and all that, but that expectation, it's not, and when they're a senior in high school, right, and they run into the guidance counselor, to see what they're going to do in 6 months. It's really starting early, and that's a little different than just the whole education, but that setting that culture early that you can go to college if you want to, and then we've got the support systems, the infrastructure, and everything in place to make that possible.
All right. Other thoughts? More college degrees. Well, one thing, a follow-up that I want to ask you, do you think we are prepared in Pulaski County to pay for the kind of education we say we want our kids to have? Are we willing to pay for it?
I don't think so. And I say, and that's indicative of what happened with Pulaski Tech and their millage increase. And I mean, whether you're pro-tax, against tax, what, it's two-year colleges serve a vital role in preparing our workforce for just upcoming industry. And so I don't think that at this point in time that Pulaski County is ready to make the investment that we really need to set our educational system on fire and be a world-class educational system. I think incrementally, people think about it, but I don't think that we are prepared to just invest the resources like we need to.
And for everybody out there who's saying it's not about the money, yes, it is about the money. That's not the only thing. And there are certainly things that can be done better with the money that we have, but if you've paid attention, and this is particularly the case in those neighborhoods where upward mobility is threatened, we just saw just recently how many millions and millions and millions of dollars we need to invest in the structures where we expect our kids to go to be educated. And if you think there's money lying around to just do that now, there's not. So that calls for an investment, and like people in this audience, when it came to Pulaski Tech, or when it comes to the schools we say we want our kids to go to, what is it you're willing to invest? And I couldn't agree more about maybe changing the way we're educating our kids in many ways. But one of the biggest things we run up against from the very people who say we need to do things very differently, and I totally agree with that, is the social expectations that people have from schools are just overwhelming. Like, please do this in conjunction with my vacation plans, because if you don't, there is going to be trouble. Please do this in conjunction with, what my family was going to do when or whenever, and that's a big thing. Please don't ruin the hospitality industry while you're doing this, because hospitality industry is more important than kids. So maybe it's an imagination that we have here too that we've not quite tapped into to make sure we have much better schools. And what that means to kids getting a degree. I want to ask you another question regarding this, because this is a real push and pull, and I think it does have very much an impact on class. I hear people say all the time, and I think it's a wonderful thing, it was never in my home whether or not I was going to go to college. It was not if I were going to college and get a degree. It was where I was going. Well, I had the absolute opposite experience. I always think that's so wonderful, because nobody in my house expected me to go to college, and I'm not unique. So I didn't have that thing of, where are you going? It's like, finish high school, and this is going to be great if you finish high school. So since that's not the case for everybody, what you related, Heather, I think, about what's happening in El Dorado and so forth, to help kids have the expectations beyond their homes are very, very important things that I think we ought to think about, not just about folks on the panel, but just anybody in the community. What can you do to make sure kids have that expectation in their heads? And maybe pay teachers so they don't migrate from the system and that kind of thing. Last question on this side of our sheet here. After much public debate, and 3 people up here are going to feel good about this. After much public debate, Arkansas state legislators recently passed a bill to provide the private option health insurance plan. How does this measure help or hurt lower income residents seeking employment and potential employers that may want to hire them to help them out with this opportunity and upward mobility? Okay, Richard.
Well, the whole point, of course, we're also the only industrialized nation that does not have universal health care. And the idea of extending health benefits and preventative care to individuals who often avoid going to see a doctor, may have a problem, and it ultimately becomes a major, often a catastrophic health illness, costs an enormous amount of money. It's a total drag on state, municipal, federal funds. And the idea of actually providing that to, and then in this case, the private option is really for those who are above the poverty line, who don't qualify for, say, Medicaid. It actually provides them with a mechanism to maintain their health, and you need a healthy population in order to actually attract individuals in. If you have a population that's constantly having higher, and you can look them up in terms of indicators, health indicators. If you see a state that has high rates of sickness, of major illnesses and stuff, that is a deterrent for any company really wanting to come in to begin with. But I say on a higher level, the fact that individuals can actually receive health care via an insurance program promotes their health. It gives us a healthier population, and it is a benefit for all of us. Because the bottom line is that the crazy thing about not approving the Affordable Care Act or not an element within the state is that if you don't have that, they're going to go to the emergency wards when they really have a catastrophic illness, and it'll cost 10 times as much as it would to actually fund them for an insurance policy.
All right. Fred?
And I think one thing, and I'm going to echo what you said, but I think also one thing that the business community doesn't think about is when you have a healthy worker, whether it's them or their child, those days that they're missing, I mean, when you miss days from work, that costs business money. And so therefore, I think that's one of the arguments that people didn't explore when looking at the Affordable Care Act is that, if you're healthier, your child is going to primarily be healthier, and so therefore there's less days missed at school, less days you miss at work, and therefore, overall it's better for the economy. And so that's just the one thing.
Well, if you don't mind me adding, it's also that if you don't seek help often when you have an illness that may turn into something that is catastrophic, that person loses the job.
Right.
Yes.
And then the cost to the companies, they've got to retrain somebody. I mean, there's all kinds of economic factors that are associated with why you want to make sure these individuals are covered by insurance.
Joyce, can I put a plug in related to the question, but not directly answering the question? Because the three of us and many people know how hard that fight was for the private option. And I'm leaving the legislature, but every year we have to reauthorize that private option.
Right.
And so that fight's not won. We won that round. Every year this comes back. So if it's important, if you believe it's important, if you believe it's important to business, if you believe it's important to poverty, if you believe it's important to people, then pay attention and be engaged and speak with members of the General Assembly, because that was not an easy vote. And I would suggest that probably the more conservative our legislature becomes, the harder that vote may be every year. So I think the private option was, I'm proud of the members of the General Assembly and what we did to pass that. But that it's an annual fight. And so I just encourage the audience to pay attention, to be engaged. I do believe the further we get into it, the more we're going to see the benefits and the harder it will be to take away. But, and since we're talking about race, I think it's really ironic how difficult this issue was for all of America. And I think a lot of it relates to it came from an African-American president, because the idea is the foundation, the belief, the single-payer concept really that started this came from a much more conservative, came from the Republican Party, and it was a good idea then. And we didn't talk a lot about politics, but what President Obama's approvals mean in Arkansas has great implications on race and what it means throughout these states that are choosing not to take their own citizens' federal tax dollars and provide health care to their own citizens. So when the states choose not to accept the Affordable Health Care Act, they're saying, yes, my citizens will be taxed by the federal government, but no, we don't want the benefit of the tax in the form of health care. There's a lot of issues on race and things going on there that I know that's not the topic here.
Yeah, I know overwhelmingly those states do tend to be southern states, so we've had so much more of an overt racial issue. And it is, I'm so glad you pointed out that this is an annual fight, because businesses and other people always will talk about certainty. I can't think of anything that's more uncertain than having to fight this battle every year, and it's really, really tough. This is the point at which I do know officially I have been told to stop and go to a question.
I want to say place does matter, and per capita income, which was shown on that first chart, which showed all the blue counties above. Well, that masked tremendous concentrations of wealth and tremendous concentrations of poverty in those counties. Just Phillips County, Pulaski County are the same. They're very wealthy people, very poor people, concentrated. Some of the sickest people in Pulaski County are concentrated and live in the shadows of our main health institutions. Some of the poorest educated people are people who live in the shadow of our universities. Our educational and medical institutions, many of them are trying to make an impact. Just look at the 72204 zip code. Why should McClellan be a problem with the facility, the type of facility you got in one neighborhood versus another? If you look at the downtown here, this is a concentration of great wealth because our leaders have been intentional. How do you make deliver that same intentionality, if that's a word, to McClellan or these other areas?
I think, first of all, you have to educate people, just like he brought it up. And one of the initiatives I saw done recently was the Imagine Central. I think it was Imagine Central, Little Rock. And right now, I know there have been meetings, for example, about the 12th Street corridor and things of that nature. So you have to educate people and then partner. That's where it starts. And then our leaders have to intentionally, we've heard that word a lot, intentionally identify places where the community will see growth, and then, you know, focus on those places, whether it's the schools or, you know, the roadways in the area and what that community needs.
Well, what about when our leaders, though, I see this just real quickly, what about when our leaders are trying to be intentional, but everybody out here is going, no, I'm not doing that? What needs to happen then? And constantly I keep getting back to the role of just you when you look in the mirror. Because I hear leaders saying, when we passed the tax, for example, just like here in Little Rock, as it happened in other places, there were folks who lived in the best part of this town who wanted us to divide the money evenly in 7 ways. Does that make any sense? If you know that a McClellan section over here, for example, is more needy, that's where it has to go beyond leaders, where you have to, you know, back up folks who are trying to do the right thing. But if you're saying, I'm not doing that, then even the leaders can't do it. That's something I think folks think about.
Yeah,
very quickly,
and we have disadvantages in the way that, certainly I think North Little Rock and Little Rock, in terms of the municipal governments, have, you know, taken some initiatives. You can see what they've done with the riverfront areas on both sides. But the fact that it really requires a partnership, and it does require leadership. I always say it takes political action. And that means at the state level, you know, really to have a plan to ensure that there are areas that we want to redevelop, that really are going to require some monies, and we want to redevelop it. So, you know, we're in an interesting political climate where the individuals are figuring out how to cut, how to provide, you know, cuts for, you know, certain groups, but not really provide monies and collect monies that can then be used for programs that benefit all citizens, but really require development of a particular area. And that would mean, like in the Southwest Little Rock, that it really there should be a focus on really redeveloping that entire area, making sure that infrastructure is the best infrastructure that exists within the city.
I think you may be amazed when you talk of the things that we say we need, how we are divesting in those things instead of investing. Even higher ed, we're doing that. Over here.
Okay, so an educated population, especially a college educated population, needs jobs that will pay them for their degrees. Okay, let them benefit from having their degrees. Historically, Arkansas has not been able to do that. Dr. Richard-Trevino mentioned that we had a brain drain. How successful has Arkansas been in attracting jobs for educated people or highly skilled people? And what are some of the problems that we have in attracting those types of jobs for people with degrees?
All right. Anybody want to, Carmen?
Yes, the Little Rock Chamber works with the state and different entities, and we have had a lot of successes in the last, I'd say, 6 to 7 years with companies such as Wellspun, Engage Labs. We've had Caterpillar, HP, a number of companies. And one of the first questions those companies have is, what is, you know, the labor like? What is the skill level, especially on the higher tech companies and things of that nature? It is extremely important that we be able to provide a labor base. And that is one reason that we have partnered with different groups, whether it's Pulaski Tech or UALR and other universities, to find out what that skill base need is, so that we can continue to attract those companies that will pay the wages necessary for college educated students from here to be able to stay here and work here at those companies. Is extremely important to match. And we have had some successes with some higher pay positions.
Anybody else have a thought on that? I'm going to...
Well, I was just going to say Chancellor Anderson probably could respond to it easier, but certainly the pay scale that is offered through the Arkansas universities is often much lower than it is in other states, which makes it very, very difficult to really compete for, you know, high-level professors or directors of programs to really come in. And in many cases, you have to sell them on the environment that's here or the potential that is here. And but it's often a very difficult thing. It's often sometimes difficult for us to maintain highly trained, high-skilled individuals because they can get offers to go other places and really increase their income significantly.
That question, that's a really good question. I think that goes back to something we saw in Dr. Paco's presentation. One of the ways we're doing very, very well in Pulaski County is the informational area. And that moves to thinking about a lot about STEM, although I think we don't need to act as if STEM is an answer to everything. But here's something that was really important to your question that we need to be thinking about, what we're doing in our schools. And if Dr. Suggs or school board members are out there, I don't mean this in a critical way, but I'm just going to make an observation here. So we're going to have a STEM school in the Little Rock School District next year at Forest Heights. And one of the things we hope to do by doing that is attract some whites back to the district, because that's a bleeding area there, and people of higher incomes. But we're talking about race here today and upward mobility. One of the questions, so all the black kids who are not going to be able to stay, and it's mostly black kids and Hispanic kids that are at Forest Heights, all those kids who are not going to be able to stay there, the majority of them are going to go to Henderson, which is already very predominantly black. What that begs for me is have the STEM school maybe at Henderson. And I know you can't just overlay and do that, but this is this idea about intentionality. If you're wanting to have upward mobility and it has a racialized aspect to it, we might want to think more deeply about putting those things that we need, skills that people need to have to get these jobs. Is there any? Yes, ma'am?
Elena, Pearsall. I'm a student at UALR. I guess skill-wise, I went to 2 different high schools, so I had the opportunity to, see the different types of teachers that were different ones. And contrary to popular belief, it does, whenever you go to a different school and then you go to another one, it really does differ as to how you'll do successfully in college. I ended up graduating at Parkview, but my first couple of years I went to Hall. Mm-hmm. Hall has an amazing math program, completely different from Parkview's, and I think that gets overlooked a lot. McCollum has great information technology programs, it gets overlooked a lot. Science-wise, Parkview is the best with that. But whenever I graduated, I noticed that my best friend was the valedictorian at Hall, but I still knew more things than her. Skill-wise, I was in the top 20% of my class, and so she would have been up there, whereas our valedictorian she was very, very smart. And I find that's messed up in a sense that you can go to one school and graduate there and not be at the same level as someone else in the same district. And it's just unfair to the students and to everyone, because you think you're getting a better education, but you're not.
All right. Responses to her, anybody? Amen to what you said.
What do we do about that? So that all schools are the same, teacher-wise.
Well, since I'm the teacher on the stage, because I do have very definite feelings about that. There's a real movement in the country, and it's going to have to get down, I think, to the level, to local levels about the quality of teachers that students have. And I'm casting no aspersions on anybody in any school, but this is something that's a policy issue. Sometimes there were teachers who were told, you're going to be transferred over to whatever school. And we'll say, well, I will quit before I go to that school. And this might be a very, very good teacher. So we need to think in terms of policy. If you work for a school district and we know we have more needs over here, and I think personally, if you think you are a great teacher, and I thought I was a great teacher, I should even think in terms of I want to teach in the most challenging places. But until we have policies where we know that we're going to be able to have people who like abilities to go from school to school and work in different schools, because it's back to the model. If we've got a very, very fantastic drama teacher, say at this school, or a science teacher or whatever, there is nothing that says you have to remain static in this school all day long or every day. So, and it is very true about where you live. We can attract more teachers, higher quality or whatever it is, depending on where you live. And it gets back to that kind of thing, but it does need to change.
Hi, my name is Emily Kearns. I have a question about class and upward mobility opportunity. I'm a proud graduate of UALR and a student at Bowen Law School, and I'm going to graduate with well over $100,000 worth of debt. And I'm not alone. Lots of black families, my family included, we push our children to go to college. We tell them every day that's the only way to escape what you're living in right now. But when they go, if their parents weren't poor enough, honestly, to get a Pell Grant, to get that kind of money, they are in so much debt when they leave, they can barely breathe. When I graduate, my student loan payment will be greater than my house payment. And that will make a big difference in what jobs that I will be able to take, whether or not I'll be able to take a job in public service, whether or not I'll be able to stay in the community I live in, which is off 12th Street. I want to be there. I want to live there with the people of 12th Street and make a difference.
Question?
But can I do it? So how can we address this issue of student loan debt and how it affects the students today and in the future?
Okay.
That's a tough one because you're not the only one in that situation. The student physicians that I've talked with are often in the same situation where they graduate from UAMS College of Medicine and they're $250,000 in debt. And it's very difficult to really receive scholarships when you're in professional school. And part of that, now there's an assumption that the job that you're going to get will ultimately allow you to pay it off. I think it's much, much tougher in the field of law. And I would suggest that your education is an investment. You know, it's a benefit to our community, particularly since you want to stay. There has to be some mechanism, and it takes political action, where, you know, a significant amount of those loans that you've taken out have to be forgiven. They just have to, I mean, you know, and again, it would take political action to do it rather than force individuals into decisions that are often extremely painful. Now, once again, I don't think in the present political climate that it will happen, but it is the kind of debate, it is the kind of discussion that we need to be involved in because this is an investment in our own people. Why should we import qualified individuals from other countries when we're actually looking at you and others as American citizens who are actually going to contribute and stay in our communities, and that we should actually be helping pay the bill to make sure that you can develop the talents to the best of your ability.
Well, I think that this goes back to, we just sat here and had a conversation about how important it is to have college graduates. And other countries who are doing well, doing much better, are investing in the ability for people to get a college education. And folks, I keep telling you, we're divesting. Because we keep talking about class and moving upwardly, and you can't do it if we keep this divestiture going on that we have, even when we call it tax breaks for people. When we're doing well, maybe we should have a great tax break. But right now, it's not that time.
Yes, real quick. I want to talk in the line of opportunity. My name is Ernest Merritt. Just relocated to Little Rock from Lubbock, Texas. My wife is a state director for HUD. I was a director of operations for workforce services in Lubbock, Texas. When I want to talk about opportunity, how do I crack the egg of meeting with people? I met with Carmen. Carmen gave me a list of names who I could contact when I got to Little Rock. My background, again, is employment, so I know I need to meet with people. But the majority of leaders, when I made phone calls in Little Rock, and hate to be blunt, but they don't return calls. So, and I understand Representative Williams there said opportunity come, but I need somebody to tell me I'm looking for work, and me and my wife is fine. Don't get me wrong, we can eat. But how do I get into the know here in Little Rock, a meeting with people when you don't get return calls? Thank you.
Okay. All right. Yes.
Okay. Can I call some of you guys? Write my name down. I want to make sure y'all know me.
I do believe that I met you and your wife at Greater Second Baptist.
You did. We sat with you. Yes.
Okay. And I think I did give you all my card.
You
correct?
did. You did.
Okay.
Just to be sure.
I just want to be sure because all right. So here's the thing. Number one, especially with legislators, there's a lot of assumption that we have staff and we have people that are just crawling out of our ears to do things for us. I'm a one-man show. And so when you don't get that call back, please don't take it personal. It's just that we have a million things going on and we're a one-man show. So I can personally say, and I can speak for Senator Elliott and Representative Williams, we don't have staff. And a lot of people think that, hey, I'm going to have my people call your people. No, you're going to have your people call me. and so please don't take it personal that if we don't return a phone call, please just continue to try to call us, because I know that's not the answer you want to hear, but it's the truth is that we don't have staff. Number two is that we also work full time. So it's not only that I'm a legislator, but I also work full time. So I'm in the office from 7 to 6, and then trying to juggle things, and I have a family, and so please don't take it personal. If you call us, try to call us again so that we can get in touch, because I know I have many colleagues that are interested in pointing people in the right direction. It's just that there's not enough hours in the day.
But I don't assume that you've made calls just to legislative folks either, because I know that there are lots of folks in this town who have a whole lot when it comes to the job market and that kind of thing, and getting you connected to capital. And there are a lot of folks out there that have much more sway with those kind of things than anybody. So I'm assuming you're talking about the power structure.
Correct. Right.
And sometimes that's not we, that's other people. So I'm expanding what you're talking about. Okay, you have the last question, sir.
All right, my name is Bjorn Simmons. I grew up in North Little Rock, went to Fayetteville, moved to Atlanta for a few years, and lived in D.C. and lived in the metropolitan areas, and I just relocated back here. And I have two quick questions. One is, being here, I've noticed that there is a big racial barrier. You spoke on it on a panel, and I do applaud you for being a diverse panel. That's impressive. First question is, what is Arkansas doing to break the racial barriers, to build more so of a rainbow coalition to promote what you were speaking towards, upward mobility? And the second question is, elsewhere the battle is a generation gap, and I've noticed that here as well. What is Arkansas doing in the strides of what is the older generation doing to attract, retain, and produce the leaders of tomorrow from the younger generation?
Okay.
One thing, I think what we're doing today is very supportive of really trying to break these racial barriers down. And that's, again, I have to commend UALR and Chancellor Anderson and Dr. Twyman for what they're doing, because I think this forum doesn't happen always. So this is the beginning. We've got to continue the discussion beyond the 2 hours that we're here today. But with regard to the generational gap, when I grew up in Little Rock, but I made people mentor me. I mean, some of it's got to be self. I bug people to death, and I made them mentor me. I remember, when I finished law school at Vanderbilt, I wanted to work. I had great offers for summer internships, but I wanted to work with John Walker because he did race case, and I only had a short time. I remember going to his office, sitting there for hours. And I never saw him. And I waited on him. I said, he'll be back. And I sat there and wait. And I tease John about that now because we are colleagues in the General Assembly. I never worked for him, but I made people mentor me. I bug people to death. So some of it's got to be on you also, and how hard you want it and what you do. And I know, at least I know most of the people on the panel, I know that we will return your calls. I know we want to help. We want to do what we can to help. But you've got to take a lot of initiative, and you've got to, kind of put someone on your back as well. I can think, and I look at the audience, I see some out here. There are just a number of people here who have been helpful to me in my development, and it may be because I was just persistent, and they just want to get me out of their office. But I was pretty persistent, and I appreciate people in generations before me, what they've done for me that allowed me to be where I am today. So I appreciate Arkansas for what it's done for me, and particularly Little Rock.
I definitely have to talk after you, because when I went to Hendrix, although Darrin and I are only a couple years apart, I remember wanting to do something in the summer to further myself, and I knew Darrin was very active and done a lot of internships and was just, and I remember him coming to me and saying, Carmen, you should apply for an internship. And I was kind of like, yeah, I know I should, but where would I start? You know, he suggested DC, and he really stayed on me. At first, I didn't think, you know, I would be able to get the position. And Darrin said, you can do it because I did it, and here are 3 other people who did it, and here's who you need to call. And he was intentional. Again, that word intentional just continues to resonate up here. I think that we, and even yourself, you know, we need to make sure that we're intentional with anyone under us so that that generational gap does not continue. There's someone I work with that's about, he's probably about 40. And he was asking me at the chamber, he said, Carmen, look, you know, I'm a young African-American company. Where are the mentors to continue, you know, mentor me? And we tried to come up with people, and there are people there, but we decided, you know, we just have to go out, like Darrin said, we have to go out and ask the people we need, and we also have to make sure we're bringing a young person from UALR up as well. It is all our responsibility because there is a gap with that, but we take it on personally, up and below. I think we'll fill that gap.
Yeah, I was going to say that certainly I think there are major institutions who really focus now. You're talking about generations and how we, you know, try to help eliminate barriers. Within university settings, you know, I've seen over the last 25 years major shifts where there really is this deliberate effort to make sure that diversity is rewarded, that diversity is included across the board, so that individuals really are not looking at, you know, it's kind of the MLK dream. They're not looking at the color of your skin. They're looking at what kind of skills and talent do you bring into the area. The Armed Forces is also extremely good about it, about making sure that individuals are treated based on their achieved status within the area. So what I can tell you is that those barriers, and I do think that in Arkansas, at times we see more rigid barriers than we do in other areas. They're gradually beginning to disappear. It's a slow process. It's not going to happen quick. Certainly, for the reason we have this forum, race and ethnicity is still a strong variable in terms of how people feel they're going to be treated. All I can say is things are getting better, and many institutions are leading and helping develop that pathway where, you know, those barriers become increasingly smaller.
And finally, I think on this issue that's important to your question, what we're doing today, and I say this as a matter of, it's just a fact of life. What we're doing today is from the vision of a person in the majority culture, a white man. It's still the case. The people whose voice is heard the most, respected the most, and responded to the most from the standpoint of power are white males. More and more white males, and everybody needs to do it, but more and more white males are going to have to do what Joel Anderson is doing with this. And more of all kind of people are going to have to do it. Because we have to really be real about this intentionality thing. We are where we are because we just hoped things would work out okay. And we already know what this has gotten us. So it is going to happen. I think in response to you and the internships and everything else, these things are not black to black, white to white, or whatever. This is the reason it is absolutely important to see color. I don't want you to look at me and erase the fact that I'm black in order to respect and know who I am. That doesn't make sense to me. Because if you don't see my color, you're not going to recognize that everybody in your firm is a white male. If you don't see my gender, you're not going to recognize that you have no women there. It's what you do with it after you see it that matters. And so when more and more people with the power to make those changes about class and race are leading and this conversation is when we will see a great deal more change. I'm a usual suspect. I am a usual suspect. That's why at the Capitol and any place else, I always try to engage people who are absolutely the opposite of me when I want to do anything at that building. And that's diversity by intentionality, and that is what we have to do to be responsive to you and to everybody else. And thank you, panel, so much. You've been a great audience, and thanks once again, Michael, for asking us to be here. It's been a terrific conversation. Thank you.
Could we just give a thunderous round of applause for this stellar panel who has shared their time with us? Just quickly, let me give a few shout outs to some people who have made today's event possible. The mighty team at the Institute on Race and Ethnicity, a team of 3. Myself, along with Donna Shelton and Tamisha Cheatham. The student greeters and volunteers who have shared in this day and hopefully were hospitable to you and helped you find your way. Of course, the Chancellor, his office that continues to provide the lion's share of resources for this very important work. There are other sponsors and particularly offices on campus that are listed in your program that have given of their service and time, and we appreciate that. The design group, whose publication collateral we would not have been able to afford at market rate if they had charged us for it, and so we're very, very pleased of the services that Myron Jackson and the design group provided to support this event. There are upcoming events listed on your program, and we would invite you to share in those, as well as to provide financial support to help fulfill the Institute's vision of making Arkansas the best state in the country for celebrating racial and ethnic diversity.